She slapped my wife in open court. 3 minutes later, the bailiff had her in cuffs. 5 minutes after that, my wife sat in the judge's chair. You heard me right. If you care about justice and the little guy getting a fair shake, stay with me to the end, because every turn in this story matters. And while you're here, please like this video, subscribe, and tap the bell so you don't miss the updates. It helps more folks like us hear the truth when a bully tries to run a neighborhood like her own private kingdom. We moved into Pine Ridge for peace, not drama. I'm Mark Ellis. My wife is Linda. We're not flashy. We drink our coffee on the back porch, wave at dog walkers, and schedule our days around the kind of ordinary things that keep a home warm. Laundry, Sunday dinners, a bird feeder out by the maple. We picked Pine Ridge, Ohio because it looked like the postcards: clean yards, quiet streets, a flag on just about every porch. The first morning after we unloaded boxes, a couple waved from across the street. They were friendly, and I thought, okay, this is going to be all right. On night 2, a woman in a crimson blazer marched up our driveway with a clipboard like she was auditing the Pentagon. I'm Cheryl Pratt, president of the Pine Ridge Homeowners Association, she announced, and then she smiled the kind of smile that's all teeth, no kindness. She called herself a community steward, which, if I'm being plain, already sounded like somebody who wants to tell you how to breathe. She welcomed us, handed us a stack of rules thick as a church hymnal, and then, on her way out, told Linda that our porch bench looked off-theme. It's a bench, for crying out loud. It's wood, it's brown. It holds a behind just like any other bench. But I kept it polite. I'd been the new guy before. I knew how a small town can be. By the end of the first week, we had our inaugural citation, unsightly leaves. Mind you, this was October. The entire Midwest was wearing a blanket of leaves. I raked, I bagged. Another citation, mailbox mismatch. Turns out our mailbox didn't match the approved color palette. I didn't know a mailbox needed to fit a pallet. Back in my day, a mailbox needed to accept mail and not fall over. But I'm not hard to get along with. I've painted worse things for less reason. Then came the one that broke something in me. Unauthorized structure, remove immediately. They were talking about the little wheelchair ramp on our side door. Linda built it so her mom could visit safely. Her mother uses a walker most days and a wheelchair when the knees are bad. That ramp wasn't off-theme. It was how love gets up the steps. I wanted to storm Cheryl's office, but Linda took my hand and said, breathe. Don't take the bait. We'll do this by the book. So we got a binder, started saving everything. Every note, every text, every photo. I'm not a paperwork man by nature, but I can follow directions, and my wife is the most disciplined person I know. Still, it's something to feel your stomach twist every time you see a white envelope with Pine Ridge HOA in the corner. By Halloween, our neighbors had changed. Folks who waved before suddenly shut their blinds when we walked past. Evelyn Brooks, a widow next door who bakes the best lemon bars, told me in a whisper that Cheryl fined her for noise pollution. Evelyn has wind chimes and a tiny radio that plays Sinatra on Sundays. Noise pollution. Can you believe it? Then Tom Harlan down the street, the retired mechanic with a flagpole he put in when his son shipped off to the Gulf, he got a warning for a too tall display. Pine Ridge began to feel less like a neighborhood and more like a place where one person's mood decided the weather. I tried to let it roll off my back until the day Cheryl sent a letter hinting at property seizure over unpaid fines. I read it twice to be sure it said what it said. Property seizure. That's not a gentle nudge. That's a threat with teeth. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay awake listening to the house breathe, the hum of the fridge, the tick of the clock, and I pictured some committee that never smiled deciding my life by vote. The next morning, a notice was taped to our door in big red letters. Not a hello, not a please, no courtesy. Just a word that hits like a shovel, foreclosure. I pulled the paper down, and right then, a black SUV slowed in front of our house while someone inside snapped pictures of our ramp. Fear does odd things to a block. Folks who once talked over fences started texting instead. Conversations got short, eye contact got shorter. We learned later that Cheryl was calling people at night, telling them that if they associated with problem households, they could expect additional scrutiny. Imagine being 81 like Evelyn and getting a phone call like that at 9:30 p.m. It's not just mean, it's bullying. The flyers started next. Anonymous, of course. Help keep Pine Ridge nice. No zones for special treatment. That's what they called it. Special treatment. Because of a ramp for Linda's mother. Because kindness and safety had to go through the proper committee, apparently. We'd wake up to fresh flyers tucked under the doormat or rubber banded to the mailbox. A couple of nights, someone knocked and ran, like middle schoolers, except I'm pretty sure these weren't children. One night, the doorbell rang at 1 a.m. I sat up in bed, heart pounding every bit as hard as any time I ever heard a backfire in a parking lot. I went to the door with my phone camera ready. Nobody there, just a pair of boot tracks in the dew. Linda kept working the binder. Dates, times, copies. She documented phone calls, took photos of every note, even saved the envelopes with postmarks. She logged every conversation we had with neighbors. "We're not helpless," she said, calm as a surgeon. "We're methodical." I looked at her and realized she wasn't just angry. She was building a case, brick by brick, like someone who has seen bullies before and knows they always, always, always trip over their own feet if you let them run fast enough. Cheryl wasn't done. She started enforcing parking rules that existed only on her clipboard. Kayla Ruiz, a college kid who rents a place 2 doors down, got 3 tickets in 1 week when she wasn't even home. We helped her pull up the camera on her apartment door. It showed an empty driveway. She still got the slips. Tom got cited for improper lighting because he hung a strand of white Christmas lights around his garage earlier than the approved season. Evelyn's lemon bars? She stopped bringing them by. She said she was afraid. Imagine that. A woman who's been on this earth long enough to bury a husband and outlast a war, afraid to bring dessert to her neighbor. Linda said, "It's time." We printed out the HOA bylaws, the state code about accessibility, and everything in between. We called an attorney, not the kind who makes speeches on billboards, but a woman with clear eyes and a practical way of talking. "We'll file for an injunction," she said, "and we'll seek damages. You have more than harassment, you have retaliation and disability discrimination too." That afternoon, the certified envelope arrived demanding $12,000 in 72 hours, or foreclosure will proceed. The number wasn't real. It included triple fines, made-up penalty fees, and inspection costs for inspections that never existed. But the fear that number created, that was real. I felt it in my knees, in my chest, in the way I stared at Linda, and she stared back like we were reading each other's thoughts. We're not losing our home, not to this. We filed. We didn't stomp out mad, though I wanted to. We went to the courthouse with our binder, a binder that Linda had tabbed with color codes and neat labels like a drill sergeant who likes labels, and we handed it to the clerk. The clerk flipped it open, raised an eyebrow and said, "This is substantial." Our court date came quick. Pine Ridge HOA versus Mark and Linda Ellis. When I saw the case name on the docket, my mouth went dry. On the morning of the hearing, we pulled into the parking lot, and there it was again. Cheryl's black SUV, pearl earrings, blazer, and clipboard, even in a courthouse, like she couldn't leave home without it. She glided past us with a smile that didn't touch her eyes and said under her breath, "You picked the wrong fight." Linda didn't flinch. She just handed me her thermos and said, "Hold this." Inside, before the judge even took the bench, Cheryl leaned over to whisper something to her attorney and pointed straight at us. Courtrooms have a particular smell: paper, polish, a hint of old coffee. The benches creak. The air hums, low and expectant. When Judge Whitaker walked in, the room stood. He struck me as fair. Gray hair, steady eyes, a man whose tie wasn't trying to impress anyone. "Be seated," he said, and everybody sat like we were following instructions from a school principal who remembered your name. Cheryl's lawyer started with a speech that sounded impressive until you listened to the words. He said policy, uniformity, community standards, and a dozen versions of, "We're just trying to keep things nice." Then it was our attorney's turn, and she was simple about it. "Your Honor, this is a ramp for a disabled visitor." The HOA ignored the law, harassed my clients, and piled on fake fines after being asked to stop. She slid Exhibit A to the clerk, then Exhibit B, and the quiet in the room was different now. You could feel it, like folks were leaning forward even though their bodies didn't move. Calm voices, clear records, no shouting. just a paper trail you couldn't unsee. Cheryl huffed, rolled her eyes, and twice tried to speak out of turn. Judge Whitaker warned her both times. "Ma'am, you will have your chance." That word, ma'am, landed like a pebble in a glass-still pond. You can't always tell when a judge's patience starts to run out. But if you've ever raised teenagers, or been one, you know the sound. We presented photos of the ramp, letters from Linda's mom's doctor, state code that requires reasonable accommodation, and a list of neighbors fined for nonsense. Evelyn's wind chimes, Tom's flagpole, Kayla's phantom parking violations. The attorney emphasized pattern, not one odd mistake, a pattern. And then, our attorney said, "There's the money." She placed a fresh stack on the podium, a set of HOA checks, cashed and deposited into an account that did not belong to Pine Ridge. The account belonged to Cheryl Pratt. You could feel the temperature drop 10 degrees. You know that silence at a family dinner when someone says something they shouldn't and everybody pretends to keep chewing? It was that silence, only more expensive. Cheryl rattled to her feet. "Your Honor," she blurted, "these people are dangerous. They don't respect authority. They've turned neighbors against the board, and she stabbed her finger through the air at Linda. She's stirring them up. This is my community, and I will not be disrespected." The judge told her to sit. Cheryl did not sit. She stepped away from her counsel table like she owned the carpet. Officer Daniels, the bailiff, moved to intercept, but Cheryl was already across the aisle. I stood up. Reflex, not plan. Everything went slow, like in a movie. Cheryl lifted her hand and swung. The crack of a slap echoed under the high ceiling. The sound hit first, then the sting in my eyes. Not because I was hurt, I wasn't the one who got slapped, but because seeing a person you love take a hit is a special kind of helplessness. Linda's head jerked to the side, and for a breath I saw fire in her that scared me more than the slap. Then she lifted her chin, put a hand to her cheek, and looked Cheryl dead in the eye. "That isn't power," she said. "That's fear." Not loud, not dramatic, just true. Everything else happened fast. Officer Daniels took Cheryl by the arms and cuffed her. People in the gallery gasped and then went so silent you could hear someone's bracelet clink a few rows back. The judge pounded his gavel. "Order! Order in the court!" Cheryl started yelling about a conspiracy, about how we were the reason good neighborhoods decline, about people like us. And I'm telling you, any mask she'd been wearing all these months slid right off. The nice words, the careful speeches, gone. What stood there was raw entitlement, loud and unashamed. Judge Whitaker turned to his clerk and said, "Verify the credential we discussed." The clerk nodded and disappeared through the side door. I looked at Linda, and she looked calm. Too calm for me. My stomach dropped. You know that feeling when you realize you're one step behind and the ground might be softer than you thought? That was me. I sat down, ran a hand over my face, and tried to line up the last few months with the look in my wife's eyes. The clerk returned with a slim folder. The judge flipped it open, read for a moment, then looked over the rim of his glasses at Linda. "Mrs. Ellis, I've confirmed your status. For the record, this court recognizes Mrs. Ellis as sworn federal judiciary." The room moved like a ripple in a pond. I heard disbelief, then the new quiet that comes when folks try to put pieces together fast. Cheryl went still, like the wind died. She said, "No." "Number." "No, no, no," Linda breathed in, breathed out, and gave the smallest nod. "Before you ask, yes, I knew my wife worked for the federal courts. I did not know how high. She never made a show of it. Linda believes in not mixing personal matters with professional duty. For months, she stayed silent about her role because she wanted to be treated like any other homeowner. But assault changes the game. Fraud changes it too." The judge was careful. He explained to the record that Linda was not presiding over our case, that he would not compromise impartiality, but that her status entitled her to be consulted on procedural questions related to the contempt that had just unfolded in his courtroom. This wasn't TV law. This was a judge doing the careful, boring, necessary things to make sure any decision he made stood up in the sunlight. Cheryl was shaking now, not from rage anymore, but from the cold panic that comes when you realize that the person you slapped isn't just the quiet lady with a tidy binder. Officer Daniels stood steady, cuffs in place, like a fence post done right. The judge asked the clerk to bring forward the exhibits again. He took his time. He read the bank records. He studied the fake fines. He looked up each time like he was measuring not just facts, but the truth beneath them. Linda asked permission to address the court on the narrow question of the evidence handling, and Judge Whitaker allowed it. She didn't grandstand. That's not who she is. She said this: "Your Honor, months ago we asked for basic decency. We were not heard. We were punished for asking. The documents show not just mistakes, but intent. I respectfully request the court safeguard the chain of custody for the HOA financial records and refer the matter to the district attorney." She sat down like she'd simply asked for a glass of water. Cheryl tried to bolt. It would have been funny if it weren't so ugly. A cuffed person in a courthouse doesn't get far. Officer Daniels, calm as a church usher, guided her back. The judge glanced at the exhibits, then at Cheryl, then at Linda, and said, "Given this record, I am referring charges to the district attorney's office." What happened next will live in my head forever, not because it was dramatic, but because it was quiet. No cheering, no grand music, just a courtroom doing what a courtroom is supposed to do. The judge recessed to handle the criminal referral paperwork. When he returned, he addressed us all, plain, steady, respectful. "I have removed Ms. Pratt from any decision-making authority related to this association, effective immediately, pending further action. A provisional manager will be appointed. If you've ever had a toothache and then suddenly you don't, that's the relief that washed through the benches." Linda didn't gloat. She didn't smirk. She asked to approach, granted, and then requested that the court review additional statements we'd brought from neighbors who were too scared to submit them until now. Evelyn's affidavit about the noise pollution fines, complete with a doctor's note about the anxiety those nightly calls caused. Tom's affidavit about the too tall flagpole, plus a faded picture of his boy in uniform. Kayla's door camera footage showing no car in the driveway on nights she got ticketed for parking violations. One by one, the judge read them, initialed them, and handed them to the clerk. The judge needed a short recess to confer on procedure, contempt, temporary orders, the kind of dry-sounding things that make or break justice. During that recess, with permission, Linda reviewed the exhibits at the clerk's table to confirm the chain of custody. It wasn't storybook. It wasn't a movie. But when Linda moved to the judge's side of the bench to check a procedural form the clerk passed up, cleared to do so by the court, you would have thought someone cut the power in the room. You could feel folks realizing they'd had her wrong. Cheryl had called Linda a troublemaker, a busybody, a special treatment seeker. But there was my wife, calm, precise, professional, helping ensure that the very process Cheryl tried to twist was handled right. Cheryl said she felt faint. The court nurse checked her vitals and said she was fine. Cheryl started crying then, the way people cry when they aren't sorry, but they are scared. The bailiff gave her a tissue. Say what you want about courthouses. There are still rules of human decency in there. Meanwhile, our attorney asked for restitution and damages. We didn't want to rub salt. We wanted to fix what had been broken. We wanted our ramp protected, our fines wiped, and our names cleared. Judge Whitaker came back with a clear order. The ramp stays. All fines related to it are void. All inspections on our property are suspended pending review. The provisional HOA manager must notify all residents that intimidation and late-night calls will cease immediately, and any further harassment will be reported to law enforcement. He required the HOA to hold a special meeting to elect an interim board under third-party supervision. And he sent a message I wish every bully could hear. Community is not a license to control. It is a duty to care. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. On the courthouse steps, the air tasted different. Cooler, honest. Tom came up, calloused hand out, and shook mine like a man shakes another man's hand when a weight's been taken off both their backs. Evelyn hugged Linda so tight I thought they'd both topple. Kayla cried that soft cry people cry when they realize they aren't crazy, that what they lived through actually happened and someone else sees it. It wasn't victory in the fireworks sense. It was something better. It was relief. Reporters asked questions. Folks snapped pictures. I didn't love that part. Neither did Linda. But when one of the local news folks asked Linda what she wanted to say to other homeowners dealing with HOA Karens, Linda gave an answer that made me proud to the bone. Document everything. Stay calm. Don't bend the truth, not even a little. The system moves slow, but it moves. And when you stand up with dignity, you give other folks permission to stand too. We climbed in our car, and the seat felt different under me, like I'd grown roots, not fear. When we pulled out, I felt the thump of the road under the tires and realized I had not really felt that in months. Here's a funny little truth. When you're under siege, your senses dull themselves to get you through. When the siege ends, even the sound of your own blinking feels new. We got home, and for the first time since the off-theme bench comment, I sat on that bench and it felt like a bench again. Not a target, just a place to sit. Linda brought out 2 mugs of coffee, and we watched a squirrel bully the bird feeder like he was Cheryl's hairier cousin. We laughed the kind of laugh that shakes loose dust from the rafters of your ribs. A week later, the mailbox thunked with a thin white envelope from the HOA, new letterhead, new signature, and one line inside. We need to talk about your ramp. Here's where most folks assume the story ends. It doesn't, because even after the queen bee is escorted out, there are always a couple of worker bees buzzing around the old hive. The new letter asked us to consider a more visually harmonious solution for accessibility. Now look, I'm not against pretty things. I like a good paint job. I like tidy hedges. But any sentence that basically says, "We want your ramp to look more Instagram-worthy," sets my teeth. Especially after what we just lived through. We didn't panic this time. Fear had lost its voice in our house. Linda wrote back, not with heat, but with clarity. "We will gladly consider aesthetic suggestions that do not compromise safety and do not add costs outside the HOA's legal responsibility for reasonable accommodation." She dropped in the code section and the judge's order. She offered a meeting time. Straightforward, adult, neighborly. Before the meeting, folks started stopping by again. Real neighbors. The kind who bring casseroles without asking if you're gluten-free. Tom came by with a folding chair he'd fixed. "Just felt like the right thing to do," he said, and you could see his shoulders ease when the words came out. Evelyn brought lemon bars still warm and told us she'd gotten 3 apology calls from board members who said they were sorry, that they'd been scared, that they hadn't known what to do. I'm old enough to know apologies don't erase scars, but I'm also old enough to know that people get to try again. If we don't let folks try again, none of us makes it to the end of the block. At the special meeting the judge ordered, the provisional manager explained the plan. Third-party auditors would review the books. An interim board would be elected with candidates vetted for conflicts of interest, and anonymous complaint systems would be replaced with signed statements only. You could feel Pine Ridge start to wake up like a town after a long January thaw. Folks asked real questions. The shouting types stayed quiet or stayed home. I took the mic. Well, it wasn't a mic. It was one of those squeaky handhelds that you pass down a row. And I said this: "We want the same thing you want. Safety, respect. A place where nobody worries they'll lose their home because they put up a ramp for their mother-in-law." People nodded. Some clapped. Not a lot, but enough. Enough to say, "We get it." Colordi, the provisional manager, asked if Linda wanted to speak. She stood, thanked folks for coming, and said, "We're not here to drag the past across the present. We're here to build better bones for this neighborhood." That's my wife. Not a speech, a sentence. Solid as oak. We worked out a plan. The HOA would pay for the ramp's fresh coat of paint and a small side rail to match other homes' trim. Nothing that changed the angle, width, or safety. They'd also install 2 matching ramps on common buildings, the pool house and the clubhouse. You know what? That last bit mattered most to me, because it said what needed saying, that accessibility isn't a favor you do for one family. It's a promise you make to the whole community. And Cheryl? The DA took the case. I won't bore you with every court date and filing because the wheels of justice turn like a slow dance song, but they do turn. We learned she had a little side system going: overfine the problem houses, funnel the inspection fees into an account in her name, and threaten foreclosure if folks didn't pay. She picked soft targets: widows, renters, newer families who didn't know the ropes yet. That kind of scheme always collapses. I don't care how clever you think you are. Time and truth are undefeated. If you're hearing this and thinking, well, at least she got hers, I'll be honest, that wasn't the best part for me. The best part was the Saturday after the meeting when Evelyn walked down the sidewalk, wind chimes in hand, and hung them back up with her chin high and her hands steady. Tom raised his flag, not a half-inch shorter than before. Kayla parked in her driveway, took a photo, and laughed. The street sounded like a street again. Lawnmowers, kids yelling, a radio somewhere playing oldies. That's America to me. Not the fireworks, not the drama. Just people living without being scared of clipboards. Do I still get mad when I think about that slap? Sure, I'm human. Seeing someone hit your wife is a memory you don't misplace. But that moment also showed me who Linda is when the heat hits. She's the kind of person who keeps her footing and keeps her word. She's the kind of person who believes in the process enough to fight through it instead of around it. And she's the kind of person who can sit in a judge's chair to check a form and then go home and make sure the coffee filter is set right for the morning. That's my wife. That's the person you want in your corner when the world goes sideways. If you're dealing with your own HOA Karen, listen close to this last part. Write everything down. Not some things, everything. Dates, times, what was said, who said it, and how it made you feel. Save envelopes, photograph notes. Don't get dragged into shouting matches on the sidewalk. Stand on the law like it's your front porch and you know where every nail is. Find an attorney who listens more than she talks. Leave room for your neighbors to be brave again when they're ready. And when the moment comes, because it will, speak with dignity. It doesn't mean you're soft. It means you're strong enough to choose the high road even when the low road is shorter. Oh, and build your life so that one board president can't make you forget who you are. That's the trick, really. Power loves to make you smaller. Don't let it. Put your ramp up, hang your flag, bake your lemon bars. Live like your home is your home, because it is. Before I close, 2 quick things. First, if this story hit close to home, drop a comment that says justice, not fear. It lets us know you're out there and you're not alone. Second, please like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. It costs nothing, and it helps folks who feel small find out they aren't. That's how we keep telling stories bullies hope we won't tell. And yes, about that new letter, the one that said, we need to talk about your ramp. We agreed to meet civilly. We're walking in with the judge's order, the law, and an open mind. I'll tell you what happens next. The night before the meeting, we found a single sheet of paper on our porch. No signature, just 7 handwritten words. Ask about the old clubhouse repair fund. If this whole HOA Karen mess is raising your blood pressure, you're not alone. Do me a favor, tap like, hit subscribe, and ring the bell so you'll know the second the next chapter drops. And if you've got a story of your own, share it in the comments. Your voice might be the one that helps a neighbor you've never met.